Testing. Ooh, testing one. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening on the couch with the Mount Pleasant Behavioral Health Ministry team. I am Dr. Crawford, and I'm going to serve as your moderator again this evening, and I am a member of this wonderful ministry team. Before we get started, let's meet the rest of the team.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tanika Rice, a licensed clinical social worker and also a faithful member of Mount Pleasant.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Jones. I'm a licensed clinical social worker as well and a member of this church.
Good evening. My name is Jackie Ladd, and I'm also a licensed clinical therapist, and I'm a member at Mount Pleasant as well.
Thank you, ladies. It's so good to see you this evening. So if this is your first time watching us this evening, we have been doing this wonderful series for the past 3 weeks now on boundaries. And we've been using this book, Boundaries, authored by Dr. Clouds and Dr. Townsend. And we have been encouraging our viewers to please purchase this book. It is a book that everyone should have in their library. It comes from a biblical perspective of teaching us how to develop healthy boundaries and really highlighting where we need some assistance in learning how to actually start using boundaries. And it's going to help your life tremendously. So last week, we've talked about boundaries with children, boundaries with your spouse, boundaries with family members, and friends. This week, though, ladies, we're going to talk about setting boundaries with yourself. We're going to talk about setting boundaries at work. We're going to talk about boundaries in the digital age. We know that technology is something that is, it takes a lot to get to understand. It's taking over. We have AI. We have all kinds of things going on with technologies. But we tend to have some difficult boundaries where it comes to technology. So we're going to talk a little bit about that this evening. So let's get started. So we've talked a lot about how to draw boundaries with other people, right? So today, let's start off by talking about how do we draw boundaries with ourselves? What are some things that we may wrestle with when it comes to saying no to ourselves?
Okay, I can start with this one. I want to also caveat by whenever we experience conflict and we take it to the Lord, who does He start with? He starts with us, right? He starts exposing what's in us that's not right. And so with this, I want to expand your question to say, think about the things you wrestle with, but what impacts your well-being, your time, your spiritual life, right? What's disturbing your peace? And more than anything, what is getting in the way of your purpose? And so as you ponder that, I want you to think about this. You have to examine yourself and ask yourself, what are my limits with things? All of us have limits. And I think when we talk about starting to set boundaries, we have no clue because we have not done that self-reflection, and we're just floating through life and allowing things to happen to us without looking at this is really about I have a limit and I don't know how to set the boundary with that. So you also want to make sure you look at I'm overwhelmed, I'm feeling drained, someone's violating my peace, and it may even be leading us into sin. Did we ever think about that? That there are times when I don't set a good boundary for myself, I sin. Yes, and I also self-sabotage. So with that, I want to know, how hard is it for you to tell yourself no? And I'm gonna just listen. I had to deal with this. You know, I started off with this. He starts with you, right? So this week when I read that, he was like, yes. And what are you not obeying that you know you need to say no to? So before I put myself out there, I have a wonderful panel here. I want to ask, is there anybody who wants to share? Give me something you know you struggle to tell yourself no about.
You know what? I'll start because the first thing you said about we must know our limits, I started thinking, I don't think that I know until I'm actually already overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're going, and you're doing. And I need to pay more attention to what my limits are and not after I've already reached it.
Yeah.
Because then I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm cranky. I'm not probably the easiest to get along with. And that's because I didn't set a boundary for myself, saying, no, Nina, you cannot do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the boundary for me would be sometimes trying to be everything for everyone else. And that can get tiring.
Absolutely.
So I need to set that boundary.
I was just going to add to that. I know we're talking about boundaries, and most of the time it's saying no to others. My issue is saying yes to me. So sometimes the boundary isn't necessarily about saying no. It's about preserving ourselves and saying yes to me. And that can be hard to do when you're a giver, a nurturer.
Sure.
And so self-care is important. So I have to remind myself to say yes to myself. So just want to remind people, it's not always about the no. Sometimes when you're looking inward, it's about saying yes to you.
Yeah.
I can really relate to that. And just thinking about where I'm at in my life right now and saying yes to something other than things that are work or ministry related. Like, truth be told, I can't really say I have a hobby. And this has been pointed out to me by loved ones. As a matter of fact, my 17-year-old was very apt to say to me, he said, you don't have any fun hobbies. All you do is work. And so being able to say no to obligations or responsibilities or something that's in the realm of work and ministry, to be able to look for and build myself and edify myself in other ways, in fun ways, in relaxation ways, resting, those are things that I would have to say that I need to work on more.
I think this goes deeper than we're just scratching the surface with this, because what I'm hearing is we're not honoring commitments to ourselves. We're having a hard time honoring our own commitments to self, and this can also play into what God has called you to. So how many things have God laid on your heart, right, and put in your spirit that he wants you to do, and you didn't honor because you were busy honoring everything and everybody else, and everyone else comes first. And I think we did this when we talked about boundaries a while back, and we talked about if you're not on your schedule, no one else is going to put you there. I'm going to say it again. If you don't put you on your schedule, no one else will put you there. So you've got to honor your own commitments. What is it God is calling you to do? And you say, I just don't have time. But you're answering the call for everyone else so that they can do those things that God's calling them to do, right? So you're giving everyone else time, right, that you really don't have. And then what do we do in the end? We complain, and we're responsible. The other thing is we just need to learn to go slow when making decisions, right? So some folks are real good. They got to pray about every little thing, like every little thing. And guess what? That's good practice. That's good practice. Even if you feel like, I kind of know that I don't have the opportunity to do that or to assist, but to tell yourself, I'm going to pray about that, or let me get back to you. So you're going to hear me talk about the practice of this as we go throughout this lesson. How are you practicing now to say no and to put those boundary limits in place? The other thing, go ahead. Nope.
I was just going to say, I feel like you're stepping on my toes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Say more.
So let me say more. And I said I wasn't going to get up here and talk about myself, that we're supposed to be focusing on others and assisting others. But the truth of the matter is, I was just having a conversation about, you know, how burnout, right? Because we can talk about burnout, and I feel it coming on. And in my mind, I'm sort of wrestling with that because I'm saying, well, it was just the holidays. I just had a little bit of time off. But I know, like, I need more time off. Yeah. And I've been telling myself that. And so 2 things, right? I've been trying to figure out, well, when can I take an extra day off, right? Just take a day off. And I mentioned this to my husband. I said, you know, I really feel like I need some time off. And he said, well, if you take time off, are you going to do more or less of the same that you're always doing? Which is something work-related. And I ignored him because I felt like he was attacking me. But the truth is, he was really just stepping on my toes. He was bringing something to the forefront, right, and just providing very direct feedback. And so hearing you sit here talk about this is making me say, yeah, I need to take some time off and let go of expectations, because in my mind, this saying yes and saying no to myself when it's appropriate, like if I don't have anything scheduled, if I don't have anything planned, then why burn my time? Right. That's what I consider it, burning my time, as opposed to simply resting or something, or doing something fun at home for myself, whatever that may be.
If I may, Tanika, I want to say something to you. You have the responsibility to show up for you, right? And you don't get to assign that responsibility to someone else. Yes?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Of course.
So with that being said, I wanted to read a scripture. Proverbs 25:28 says, he that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. And I felt that when I read that, I said, it describes what you said. That frustration we get when we say, I'm overwhelmed, I'm burnt out. So much anger towards self comes with that we don't really acknowledge. I know when I'm burnt out, I'm angry at me because I'm responsible. No one can burn us out. No one can burn us out.
Say that again?
No one can burn us out.
That's really good, because we tend to blame other people, right?
We do.
So what are some rules then, right, that we need to create for ourselves to help us in this area?
Well, I would say start with something really simple. And this hit me today. You know, the book gives a lot of great tips, but I said we have to start practicing. So first, you need to make this a matter of prayer, because you're doing something you're not comfortable with and you have not been able to do. Make it a matter of prayer first, and then you want to plan, and then you want to execute. That means start practicing. And you can start with small things. Practice just saying no to your friends. Tell them in advance, hey, I just want to practice with you what it feels like to say no. Even if I'm just thinking about it, I want to practice with someone. Find someone safe, right, that can give you honest feedback. And that's what I would like to say about that. It's that simple, right? Honor yourself by starting somewhere, and you've got to practice it. Start today.
Practice makes perfect. That's what they say. And I like that, because it gives us an opportunity to try to start getting comfortable with learning how to set boundaries. I like the example that you gave to use practice on someone. And then the more you practice something, it may start to become a habit. And that's what we want to form, better habits at learning to set healthier boundaries. I want to move on to technology. Yes.
Before we move on, I just wanted to say that we have a number of comments in the chat.
Oh, wow.
And so I
Yes.
wanted to
Let's get to
highlight
them.
some of the comments. And first, I want to also encourage people to continue to put in your comments and your questions while you have us here, where we can, we'll be checking periodically and answering or restating what's in the comments. So thank you all for your comments thus far. A lot of folks who this is really hitting home and resonating with. One individual, for the individual that put in the comment that you're so broken right now and you have a lot going on, a lot to deal with, I want to encourage you to, just like Jackie said, to connect with someone in your support system who you can begin to talk with and unburden yourself with, sharing some of what's going on with you, not with the idea that they're going to do the work for you, of course, but just so they can share in and help carry that heavy load by supporting you. And we'll be praying for you as well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yes, you can always, for those of you who need additional support or resources, yes, you can reach out to us at askbht at mountpleasant.org. You would spell out Mount Pleasant.
And we will be looking at the comments on Facebook and YouTube. So share with us what you're feeling about what we're discussing.
Thank you, Tanika, and thank you, viewers, for engaging with us. We really, really appreciate the feedback that we've been getting, the participation that we've been getting. We're just so thankful that it's being well received. So let's talk about some challenges that we set in terms of boundary setting around technology. How does having poor boundaries with technology look?
Yeah, so I'll start us off with how this looks. It could look like you're scrolling at midnight when you should be sleeping.
Mm-hmm. Good one.
Right? It also could look like you're on your devices when you should be productive, so working. Those are a couple of things, as well as checking your emails constantly and replying regardless of the day, hour, or night. And of course, repeated or overuse of social media. And so you might find yourself just gravitating toward it at times when really you should be doing something else, or you have plans to do something else. But that's taking up a lot of your time. But we can, just like we were talking about before with setting limits on yourself, we can set boundaries and parameters on ourselves with regards to how much screen time we allow ourselves, and we'll talk about, what may be best for you, because we all have stuff to do throughout the day, right? So that's one, and choosing to disconnect so that we can connect with others around us. And that's a big one. Go ahead.
Is it? I think about our children. Back in the day, like, we didn't have any technology, but dinner times and family times, those things were sacred. We had to communicate with one another. We had to be in relationship with one another. There are times when I'm out to dinner with my own family and I look around and all of us are scrolling.
On our
We're
cell
at dinner.
phone.
And I'm just like, one time my husband and I said, we have to set a rule. Like, when we're like, get off the devices, because we're not talking. Everybody is at the table, but we're all on our phones. And then when I take a look around the restaurant, so is everyone else. I'm just like, we don't talk to each other anymore. So setting boundaries with technology in terms of relating to others and not being disconnected is beyond huge. It's like the way of the world. When you see people walking in the street, they're not paying attention to crossing the street, they on the device. Like, we are so disconnected from everything and not self-aware of what's going on around us because of devices and technology.
Now, I'm going to say like our bishop, I'm off my notes now, right? I'm off my notes, but I want to say this. We have to lead by example, because this is making me think of this loneliness epidemic that we are in. And so we see our more mature adults who are suffering from loneliness, but guess who is on the other end of that spectrum? Our youngsters, right? And so we have to be the ones as parents, as aunties, as uncles to say, okay, we're going to put that phone down, right? We're going to, you're going to communicate with me. Let's have a conversation. I want to find out how you're doing. I want to know about what you're into. I want to know your likes, dislikes. I want to hear from you what's going on without the phone.
I was just going to add, I was thinking exactly what you were thinking. I'm off my notes right now. But just, also too acknowledging that social media, there is a lot of misinformation.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of what our bishop says, whose report are you going to believe?
Yes.
And so it can lead you astray if you're not mindful of the misinformation on social media as well. And so it's important to limit and be wise about what you read and what you let in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's extremely important, because one of the things I wanted to press upon is that nowadays you see every and anything on social media. People post their entire lives on social media these days. And when I'm looking sometimes, I'm just like, man, they really don't have any boundaries of what they want people to know, or even what they want people to see. And so that goes back to what you were just talking about being careful about what we are looking at, what we are taking in. But one of the things that I've realized lately is that, wow, people really struggle with boundaries and what they post on social media.
Yeah. And I work with adolescents, and one of the things I'm very interested in is there are a lot of studies right now about the impact that this social media and phone addiction, the impact that it's having on children long term. So they're starting to do a lot of studies around that, and they're saying already we can see that youth are becoming more socially awkward, withdrawn, and having very poor interpersonal skills. So that's very important, to just understand. I think I saw that they're looking to change the age limit, or place an age limit on when youth can be on social media. So there are a lot of talks around this, because we're already seeing the disruption, and especially in the schoolhouse, not being able to take kids' phones, parents demanding that their youth have their phones at all times because there might be an emergency and things like that. But then if they're not using it for an emergency, they're not understanding that, it's just a disruption right now. And teachers are having a hard time in the classroom around the phones.
Yeah. All right. So as it pertains to what you were sharing about with people being more and more boundaryless, this brings me to boundaries. One way of looking at it is boundaries are about freedom, self-control, responsibility, and love. However, freedom should never be used to harm yourself or others. And so with this boundarylessness, right, there can be harm definitely that's being brought to others, right? We see that a lot in social media posts and comments, but also sometimes people are putting out things that unbeknownst to them come back to harm them as well. Yeah. And so we are called to be free. In Galatians 5:13, it states, "Do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh, rather serve one another humbly in love." So this freedom to continuously choose technology to the point of overuse and misuse can lead, of course, to loss of self-control. And if you are no longer in control of your device, then that means that your device is in control of you.
Amen.
Right? And so we just need to get honest with ourselves about that. Because if you cannot go to the bathroom without taking your device with you, if you wake up in the middle of the night, and I know people, who've talked about this, they wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and they grab their device and they want to check and see what's going on social media.
And now you're stepping on my toes now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Let me give you
Turning
another.
over like, what's going on in the world? Go to bed, Nina.
Go to bed. But here's another Bible verse for you, right? And for all of us. 1 Corinthians 6:12 says, "You say I am allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. And even though I am allowed to do anything, I must not become a slave to anything."
Yes.
So this little thing that I have right here, because I'm checking the comments, everyone, right? But this little thing can be our master.
Yeah.
It can have where now I'm so tethered to it that I can't imagine what the day would be without it.
Right.
That's a problem.
But I was going to say, as we talk about practice and boundaries, leave your phone at home. Try that one day. See how it feels. It feels uncomfortable, but yet maybe it can spark something in you that says, you know what, I felt free because someone wasn't demanding my time with a text message or an email. And if they were, I'll get to them when I can.
Yeah.
It's about that freedom. And so practice that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jackie.
I was just going to say, how many people have gone back and said, oops, I left my phone
Oh,
on the way to
hello?
work?
I will
Listen.
turn around, okay?
Yeah. No
Be
matter
late to
how
work. I'm
close
going
we
back
are
to get
the-
my phone.
Right. Because we're so controlled by that device. And what we like to hide behind is say, oh, everything is on my phone or my schedule, my calendar, as if things would just fall apart if we didn't have that device.
But that part is true, right? And that's the difference. We are really tethered to it because it used to be a time when a phone was just a phone. But now in this digital age, it has our calendars. It has our email on there. It's a
It even
computer.
has our money.
Money.
Right, our money. Absolutely. So everything is in this one device. It really has found a way to sort of weasel its way into our lives and to connect to us, whether we want it to or not. We can't even find a payphone any longer. There used to be a time where, if you were in
You just dated yourself, by the way.
Big time.
it's true.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
so now you got to ask someone else, can I borrow your phone if you want to
Right.
make a call?
Right.
Yeah.
And we all have them. So, can I just throw one more thing in there for adolescents and children? Parents really want to make sure if you find that your child is not secure enough and responsible enough to guard their eye gate, their ear gate, and not only that, but when they start experiencing things like bullying or just receiving information that's not healthy, you have a duty to set the boundary for them, right? And oftentimes they're not going to tell you, so you also want to make sure you're checking the social media, you're looking at the computer, you're checking the history. And if you don't know how to do that, Google it right on that device, and it'll tell you how to check and put up safeguards as well. There are so many safeguards, but let me say this, and we've said this too around technology. For everything that's created, something is created to go around that. So there's a back door to everything, and our children will find it. So technology, that's one of the reasons it keeps moving at the pace it's moving. It's like, oh my, we need to be able to do this. Oh, we need to be able to do that. And sometimes I need to be able to break the locks and the passwords.
And it may mean that you start with when they are of an age that's questionable, whether they're able to be responsible with it
Yes.
or handle it, is share those passwords with me.
Yes.
so that I do have the access to check and make sure that everything is okay.
So, a couple of points I just want to encourage people, like moving away from our youngsters and assisting them through this. But if you yourself are having concerns about the relationship that you have with your device or devices, I want to encourage you to do a couple of things. There are a few things that you can do. One, you can go back to what Nicole said and try leaving your phone at home, or just disconnecting from social media for maybe 6 hours, 12 hours. I would also encourage you to, or I want to make it the charge for you to turn off your phone or silence it during important events. Sad to say, I was at a funeral a few days ago and someone's phone went off. Now, of course, sometimes it can be a mistake, right, where we forget. But there were a couple of announcements that were made to silence your phone before things got started. So turning your phone off or silencing it during important functions, during family dinner, when you're out with friends at dinner or at the movies, at church, things like that.
Can I just add to that? One of the moments that remind me of how phones have taken over, if you go to a concert and all you see is everyone's phone. And I had gotten in the habit of putting it down and trying to be in the moment.
Yeah.
Because we miss a lot of opportunities, we miss a lot of experiences, beautiful moments, because we're trying to capture it on a phone.
Instead of living it right
In
then
the
and
moment,
there.
right.
So that is a good one. Absolutely. Don't record, just be present in the moment. And another big one that I want to encourage people is, for a multitude of reasons, for health reasons, for improved sleep quality, but stop scrolling, turn your device off, put it on the charger at least 60 minutes before you go to bed. That's the recommendation.
Yeah, and that's actually based in research
It
that it helps you
absolutely is.
sleep.
Yeah.
That screen will prevent you from getting the proper rest that you need. And so putting it down 60 minutes before will ensure that you have a better chance of getting a good night's rest.
Yeah.
So we're going to transition to work. This is a tough one. This is a tough one.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the biblical basis of work.
So the book talks about it, and I love how they talked about it, that after the fall, it happened with Adam and Eve. God cursed the ground that they walked on and informed them that they will painfully toil on this earth. And so we have this love-hate kind of resentment for work as it is, but it's important that when we think about boundaries at work, that we think about work differently. And what I found is that, and through the book, helped remind me that work develops character, and it helps us grow spiritually, because we're interfacing with people. We're trying to let our godly light shine. And we think about a calling as ministry, right? But every job that we do is a calling. It's God's way of directing our path with our gifts and talents. And so whatever, I think of so I am a therapist, and I do faith-based counseling and therapy, but I do that whether the person requests faith-based or not, because God is in me. And so think of your job as the same. It is your partnership with God to give your gifts and talents to humanity. And so, first of all, if we think of it like that, I think that helps us not have this love-hate relationship with work. Work should be a gift that we give to the world based on what God has given to us.
Yeah, that's really good, because I remember I've always felt like God put it on my heart to always wanted to be a psychologist, right, from a young age, and interested in why people do bad things, violent things, crimes. And I remember all of my work has been with children. And one day I woke up and felt like, I'm going to work with some adults now. God said, okay. So I went on ahead and got this job working with adults. It was the worst experience. And then I got home and I said, okay, God, I'm going to go back to juvenile justice because obviously was not my calling. You wanted me to work with children. So why did I think that I needed to go and do something different? So that really resonated with me.
And I was going to say there's seasons for it, too. You might not have the same job all of your career. There may be a change in season. God may speak to you to do something different. In your case, Nina, it was to go back to where your gifts and talents are and comfort is. But as a Christian, we are co-laborers with God, whatever job we have. And that comes from Galatians 3:23. And so the other part of that is finding the work that fits you, kind of like you just talked about.
So the question would be, well, how do you know when or if you're doing God's work? How would someone know that?
You have to start with knowing your gifts and talents. You have to really study what is it that God has gifted you with, what talents do you have, and also from your experience, what is it that you like to do? And when I talk, I have a 21-year-old son, and so I say, what you feel today might not be what you feel in 10 years, but be attuned to what it is that you like and what makes you feel good when it comes to work. And you have to think of it as a partnership with God, so you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing, finding the right purpose. Have you ever heard the quote, choose a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life?
I have.
I love it because I feel like even the work that I do is very difficult, but I do love it. And so I don't feel it as a heavy burden. And so I think if we start there with having the right mindset about work, setting boundaries gets a little bit easier.
You know what? You just said something, and when you talked about your 21-year-old son and how it sounds like you were letting him find his way. As a parent, and we talked about boundaries, sometimes I think that we may feel as though our kid is gifted in something, and we force them sometimes to do some things because we think we see something in them. And then sometimes that's not really what they want to do. And I just would encourage parents to listen to that because I know that I've been, oh, yeah, my daughter's going to be the next Angela Bassett. I'm going to put her in everything. And then after a while, she said, I don't think I want to do drama anymore. And I was like, what? You sure? You're so good? No. One more thing. So I said to her today, I signed you up for them. She said, oh, my God, what did you sign me up for now? You didn't even ask me. And I'm just thinking like, yeah, you're right, but I think I know what's best. But she was trying to establish, Mom, I'm trying to set some boundaries here. I'm just like, yeah, but you're only 13. But I'm just like, well, that doesn't matter because I have to start listening because children, we need to allow them to set some boundaries for themselves. And we talked about that last week.
Right. And I love that, though, because as parents, we should give our kids opportunities to find what they like, but listen to them when they don't perform in ways that look as though they enjoy it.
Right.
And that seasons change.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you know? And so you know when, because I call it healthy exposure, but you know when your kid is on the soccer field and everyone's running circles around them, and at the end of every game, you take him home crying, that's a sign, right? That's a sign. And it looks like that. They are frustrated, they communicate it, but healthy exposure and saying, hey, I want you to try something different is great because guess what? Also, in the midst of that, we get the greatest of the greats, right? Kids who go, I didn't even know I was good at that. Right. So trying new things is healthy. And a lot of times we as parents do the flip. If I'm not interested and I've never done it, you don't need to do it either. And so we have to be careful. Yeah.
And that's just not a word for our kids, our adolescents. That's for adults, too.
Yeah.
J.K. Rowling wrote the Harry Potter series in her 50s. And she had no idea that she was actually a writer. And so let God lead you and try things that you never tried before because you never know where your gifts and talents could lead you.
I like that because it brings me back to how we were talking about freedom and how our relationship with God, like God, the relationship that we have, He's not ever forcing us to do anything, that we have free will. And so thinking about free will, letting our children have agency, and when we don't, how that could potentially affect and limit them in the future with
Right.
relationships that they have, and not being able to say no, saying yes to everything, feeling like they're obligated to stay or stick with one particular job because this is where I'm supposed to be or this is what looks good, as opposed to having that liberty to sort of figure out what's best for them at this different stage of life.
Absolutely. We have some comments from Facebook I want to share. Crystal says, unfortunately, a lot of our family has latchkey kids, so the phone is a safety mechanism. But you will definitely need to establish boundaries when the child is the only one in the home. So that's great. That is so true. And also, she says, the peace and joy that you get when you serve with your heart. Your heart gets broken sometimes, but we know only what we do for Christ will last and gives you fulfillment. Thank you for those comments.
I have one comment as well. So true. Our plans are not always God's plans. That is true. Also, the closer we become to God, the Holy Spirit will reveal our gifts to us.
Yes.
And I would also say people who are close to you, ask them if they are grounded in the word and you're unsure of what your gifts are, ask them what they see in you. What gifts do you see me operating in? Because sometimes things are so innate to us. We do it and we do it so well that we don't even think about it. We completely miss it. And so it takes someone else to say, hey, you're excellent in this. And you're like, really? It doesn't even register.
Well, what are some tips that you can share with us of how to set specific boundaries where it pertains to work?
So, most commonly, some of the things that we deal with on our jobs that we can set boundaries with. And in this first one, I know we all had an experience with getting saddled with another person's responsibility on your job. Someone asks you one week, hey, can you type up the minutes this time because I got something going on? That's fine. As Christians, we do favors and we support each other, but one time turns into 5 times. That's when you know that this is a boundary issue. And you're not helping that person by doing their job. It actually is putting a burden on you. So it's really taking responsibility for you. And sometimes that means saying, that's not my job. And setting a healthy boundary to say, if you're having some difficulty, maybe you should talk to your supervisor, but I can't continue to do your work. And I know that seems hard to say, but it's so important because then what happens is, then if that work is not to par, you're taking ownership for it and allowing that person to not take ownership for it. So that's one. Working too much. Setting a boundary when it comes to how much work you do. I heard this all the time that, if you work yourself to death, your employer will have your job announcement in the paper before your funeral.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that you have to set a healthy boundary. Your employer is not taking responsibility for planning the job in the right way. And so that overload on you is not your problem. It's your company, it's your supervisor's issue, not yours. And so it's important to know what your job description is and make sure you're staying within that. Or you go back to your supervisor and say, hey, this really hasn't been my job before, and now all of a sudden it's my responsibility and I'm overwhelmed by it.
I thought about something that I have an example that kind of bridges boundaries with self and boundaries with work. And I'm going to talk a little bit about going to work sick. How many times have we done that? I know that I have thought, the company cannot run if I'm not there. so I'm going to work no matter how I feel. And a wise person once told me, that job is going to be there whether you're there or not. So we have to set boundaries where work is concerned. If you're not feeling well, stay home, because then you're going to get the whole office sick. Now we all sick because you came to work, because you think that work can't go on without you. And it will, and it can. So that's a good point about it's the company's responsibility to find someone to cover, not yours all the time. Because illnesses come up, emergencies come up, you can't plan for those things. But you have to take care of yourself and set boundaries where that is concerned.
I thought about what Tanika said earlier, too. She said, I felt like I just needed a break. And I have to remind people sometimes in therapy that leave is for you to use. You know, some people have all of this leave, but I feel afraid to take off. It's your leave. Legally, it's yours to do what you need to do with it. And I encourage people to take a mental health day. Whenever you need that moment, use your leave for that purpose. So I'll go to the next one, prioritizing the work. So you all know, I'm sure your desk is filled with obligations, responsibilities. Prioritize it so that you're giving the best of you to the work that's most important. And also compartmentalize. Decide that your work life will be separate from your personal life. For two reasons. We don't want the overflow and the overwhelm of work to spill over into our personal relationships. You know, you always hear the analogy, a man at work gets angry at the job, but he goes home and argues with his wife and kicks the dog. You know, so those things can happen. We do carry it around. I like to sit in my car before I go into the house, just to take a minute to debrief, woosah, and allow myself to leave everything that was at work. Now that we're working from home, that's a little more difficult. But I stay in my office, even though I've shut my computer. I stay in my office and take a second just to let it wash over me. And then I go and join the rest of the family. So it's important to compartmentalize. The other part of the compartmentalize that's important is you can't expect to have a loving family relationship and get support as if your work setting is a personal setting. There are people at their jobs that want to connect with people in a more personal way, or they want the support at their job that they do in their personal life. And so that can really be uncomfortable, because then there's transference that happens on the job, and then you're not functioning in your workspace like you should. You're expecting something from your job that the job can't give you. And then the last one is just know that conflicts with authority, your supervisors, and coworkers, the real problem is how you respond. Because if you allow someone, the law of power says if we can only control ourselves. And so that if we're trying to control someone else, we're giving away our power. So just remember on the job when the conflict arises that take ownership for your part, protect your peace, and don't give away your power.
Thank you for that. That was amazing, because I think it's difficult and challenging a lot of times to set boundaries at work, and it getting enmeshed with expectations, not only that we put on ourselves, but that we take on from other people. So thank you for sharing those tips of how to try to set more healthy boundaries at work. So let's put this all together. So we define boundaries as setting personal limits. We discussed it as providing safety, comfort for yourself, allowing people to be more respectful of you and your wishes. And we talked about really communicating your boundaries effectively to other people, because they won't know unless we tell them, unless we explain it to them. But one of the things that we believe is going to happen once you start putting the practice into work, setting the boundaries, you're going to start getting some resistance. So I want to talk about some of the resistance that one may start to see when they start practicing these boundaries that we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks?
Yeah, I can start. One of the things we see that's very common is the communication. It changes. So whether it be you that had the poor boundary or someone else, right, that you had to address about the poor boundary, the communication changes. We don't talk as much, right? We avoid because a boundary was set, right? And so we have feelings around that. We're angry, we're upset, and sometimes we just simply have not ever been confronted. And so we're sitting with that, trying to figure out, where do I go with this relationship? Because it's natural for us to take everything personal. So everything is personal. Nothing is about growth. Nothing is about healthy pointing out, right? Because we want to see each other be better. So I would say communication being limited or cut off altogether, that's a sign of resistance. Anger. They become angry instantly. As soon as you start saying, hey, I just want to talk to you about what may not work for me, and it's like, oh, no, you didn't. Yeah, you get, or as you try to speak, and we hear this all the time, you can't have a healthy dialogue because you're being cut off at every word, right? We're jumping in. It's that jump rope mentality. As soon as you say something, I got to rebuttal, I got to defend. That's a sign that you're meeting a lot of resistance. And then the guilt, or people who guilt trip you about you having boundaries. You're so sensitive. You're so sensitive, right?
The book did something that I thought was instrumental when we talk about it from a biblical perspective. You may even start hearing, oh, so I thought you was a Christian.
That's the worst. That's the worst.
The-
And guess what? Some of us are arrested by that statement. We allow people to really hold that over us. And it's like you need to be bold enough and courageous enough to say, and I am. And he called me to have good boundaries.
But before we even do that, right, we have to recognize it for what it is. This is an attempt, this other person's attempt to manipulate and control us in order to flip it so we can go along with and agree to whatever it is they're asking of us. When we recognize that, and that is not of God.
Yeah.
Coming back to that freedom piece, I should have the right to be able to say no for whatever reason, right? And they should have the ability to go and ask for help from someone else. But if you're guilting me, and if I allow them to guilt me, right, and give into it, then I have to realize that, again, I'm the one that's responsible for my own feelings.
That's right.
And I can't blame them, especially when I recognize what's taking place. So what I would say is lean into feeling uncomfortable, that, when they guilt you, that's them trying to pull on those heartstrings to get you to go along, and sitting with the discomfort of standing your ground. And then what do? Call it out. Meaning, don't say, oh, you're trying to guilt me, but just say, it seems like you're really having difficulty with me saying no.
Yeah.
Right? Or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Right? Where you recognize and you can empathize, like you're really having a hard time with this, it seems. Right? But you put it back on them. You don't absorb it. You don't take it on for yourself, because it's not your issue. It's their issue to figure out.
It's the same as when you set a boundary with a child. It can look the same with an adult. You can get a complete fallout and meltdown, and you wonder, am I talking to an adult? But what I want to say about that, this whole lesson is about us and the boundaries that we know we need to set. But I want to also address the fact that someone can come to us and say, you broke my boundary, right? And so on the flip side of that, I don't want us to miss that the golden rule is that we still have to be respectful, we have to be loving, but we have to be willing to listen and hear. And sometimes it might be helpful to even repeat back what you thought you heard them say, because that shows that you really care to listen. But then you have a duty to do something with that.
Yeah, I just want to say, and piggyback on what you said, Tanika, it's going to be difficult sometimes to hear your loved one give you the resistance, right? It's going to be difficult, but remember, when you're setting a boundary, it's really necessary, and it's necessary for you, and it's going to be helpful for them in the long run. They may not see it at the time, but you setting boundaries is really, really for you. So I just want to say that for the boundary setter, that it's going to be difficult when your loved one, your family member is giving you this resistance. They're angry, they're guilt tripping you. They even could be blaming you. Oh, I'm going to be kicked out of my apartment if you don't give me this money. Well, that's more of a problem that you created, not my problem. So it's going to be challenging, but it can be done, you know. And I couldn't stress that enough, that, you know, it's going to be difficult, but it can be done.
It can.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that goes back to the very first week when we were talking about boulders and backpacks,
Yes.
right? So again, their mismanagement of their funds or whatever may have transpired. Now, I'm not talking about, you know, some catastrophe that came about and you know that, boy, this is a situation where we all have to rally around and support this individual. That's not what I'm speaking about. But we know those individuals where it's always every month, every other month, it's a sad song.
Yeah.
It's a sad story. They're asking for help again. That is not your responsibility to manage their household, to pay their bills. And so again, letting them know, right, I'm sorry that you're going through this, but that is your responsibility, not mine.
I just was going to say to that, so folks who are enablers have poor boundaries. So if you're enabling someone's bad behavior, you are an enabler, but you are also getting in the way of what God may want to do in their life, and to see them to a place of responsibility for themselves. And so when you get in his way, guess what? Sometimes you and that person will have to deal with consequences. So be careful when you say you're going to be the enabler, because sometimes we get what I want to call a God complex. It's my job to fix, protect, prevent, right, the fall, if you will, the hurt, the pain. That is not your role.
I just want to say, too, it reminds me of generational curses, that sometimes a lack of boundaries, it is systemic in a family. And it's important for that person that's trying to break out of that to understand that the manipulation will come, the anger will come. But in order to step out of that curse, you've got to set that healthy boundary and stick to it. Because like you said, eventually enabling and being responsible for someone else's needs when they really are above and beyond what you can do, you both suffer consequences.
Yes.
Right. So thank you, ladies. So to recap, you know, healthy boundaries, what they look like, they look clear, they are respectful, you set limits, you can be assertive, you can tell people I'm not comfortable with that. You take responsibility and ownership of your own happiness. We can't find that. We can't expect other people to give that to us. We have to take it on ourselves. And just remember that we're not responsible for other people's feelings when we're setting boundaries. And we cannot try to fix them. But we have to stand firm in our boundaries and be loving about it. I'm not saying being rude or anything like that, but you will be met with some resistance that we talked about, the anger and guilt and blaming. So just be prepared for that, and hopefully be able to reflect back and just say, you know what, I understand this is not comfortable. You're not used to me doing this, but this has to be done. This was excellent, ladies. And so before we move on to close out for the night, we always like to share a self-care statement. Jackie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, for some, this conversation may have been a little heavy because, you know, it's not good to focus on you and your stuff. So if you had a lot of feelings and thoughts that came up for you, I would say rather than be upset or anxious about them, honor them, right? take heed to some of the things we're talking about and talk to someone if you need encouragement on how to take the next step, how to move beyond having poor boundaries for yourself and others. And more importantly, just remember, no one is going to take care of you better than you. So if you're waiting for someone else to do it, not good. And the only other person that cares about you more than you would be the Lord Jesus himself, right? Because he is a very present help in the time of trouble. That's the word of God. So if you don't believe that, then you got to look at where your faith is and learn that also in taking care of yourself is trusting what he said he'll do for you.
Thank you. And Tanika, would you close us out in a word of prayer?
Yes. Dear Lord, you know where each and every one of us struggle, Lord. Lord, I would just ask you, Lord, to help us in this area of boundaries. Help us to develop healthy boundaries with our loved ones, with our neighbors, with those at work, Lord. Help us to develop healthy boundaries with ourselves. Your word tells us that in our weakness, you are made strong, Lord, and we need your strength in this area, Lord. I thank each and every one who tuned in and came out to see or hear our talk on boundaries, Lord, and I ask that you would bless each and every one of them. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for this time that you've given us. Amen.
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 So once again, thank you for our viewing audience online, and thank you for our in-person guests. Thank you for coming. And listen, next week we got a treat for you. We have our very own Sister Cato and Bishop Robinson, who are going to be our guest panelists, talking about boundaries in God. You don't want to miss it. So join us next week on the couch. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.